Welcome to class. In the previous unit, we have spent time doing two important things. First, we examined realistic research situations in order to understand how ethical problems usually begin in academic work. We saw that in many cases, ethical risks do not come from cheating, fabrication, or deliberate deception. Instead, they emerge from a series of decisions that appear reasonable, professional, and even efficient at the time. These decisions often feel aligned with institutional expectations and everyday research practice. Second, we work on building ethical awareness. In Unit 2, we ask who researchers are actually responsible to when they write and cite academic work. In Unit 3, we examined why ethical problems still occurred, even when researchers understand these responsibilities. We saw that pressures, rules, and tools all shape how choices are made. Now, in this unit, we need to make a clear shift. At this point, we are no longer focusing only on understanding or experimentation. We need to start drawing lines. The central question of this unit is not why ethical problems happen, but where responsibility becomes non-negotiable. In academic writing and research presentation, what are the minimal boundaries that researchers must not cross, even when choices feel practical or common? And in this unit, we are not talking about listing detailed rules or regulations. It is not a writing techniques workshop. We are not trying to teach you how to optimize language, polish arguments, or follow specific citation styles. Those skills matter, but they are not the focus here. What we are doing instead is identifying minimal ethical responsibilities. They are boundaries that remain in place regardless of pressure, deadlines, and institutional expectations or tool availability. We are not asking how research can be made perfect. We are asking what must not be compromised. This distinction matters because many ethical problems arise when researchers confuse excellence with acceptability. Improving clarity, coherence, or efficiency can be legitimate goals. However, when those goals begin to undermine responsibility, ethical boundaries are crossed. This unit therefore concentrates on the lowest acceptable standard, not the highest ideal. By focusing on minimal responsibilities, we avoid turning ethical into an abstract or unrealistic standard. The goal is not moral perfection, but ethical reliability. These red lines exist to protect the readers, the scholarly community, and the researchers themselves by ensuring that responsibility remains visible and traceable in academic work. The first red line concerns misattribution of contribution. Research presentation must not lead readers to naturally assume that ideas, analytical frameworks, or line of arguments are the researcher's original contributions where they are primarily derived from existing scholarship. The key issue here is not plagiarism, it's the narrow sense, and it is not simply whether citations appear in the text. The ethical risks arise from how writing works as a whole. Structures, tones, and emphasis can lead readers to attribute intellectual ownership in ways that authors may not explicitly intend. If a framework is presented as coherent, mature, and central to the analysis, readers will often assume that it represents the author's own contribution unless clearly signaled otherwise. This is why misattribution is fundamentally about perception. Even when sources are technically cited, writing can still allow ownership to blur. In such cases, readers must responsibly credit the researchers with ideas that actually belong to the literature. At that point, ethical responsibility has already been compromised, even though no formal rule has been violated. To avoid crossing the first red line, the minimum acceptable practice is not perfect citation technique or exhaustive referencing. At the minimum, researchers must clearly signal which parts of the work are primarily organizing, synthesizing, or restructuring existing research. This signaling does not require lengthy explanations or repeated disclaimers. What it does require is the key arguments, not written in a way that allows them to be naturally read as original theoretical contributions when they are not. Framing matters. Introducing a framework as synthesis of Pyrrhus' work, rather than allow it to stand as implied original contribution, makes a meaningful ethical differences. This practice protects both readers and authors. Readers are given a more accurate understanding of where these ideas come from, and authors avoid unintended claims or originality. The red line is crossed not when citation is imperfect, but when writing allows readers to misidentify who contributed what. Preventing that misidentification is a minimal ethical application. The second red line concerns researchers' accountability. Research presentation must not weaken the researcher's ability to clearly explain, defend, and justify their core arguments and choices. Authorship requires more than producing texts that look academic. It requires the ability to stand behind the reasoning that text presents. This red line becomes especially important in contexts involving supervisors, collaborators, or writing support tools. When arguments are shaped by the external input, it can become tempting to treat responsibility as shared or delegated. However, ethical accountability does not disappear simply because advice or tools were used. If a researcher cannot explain why a concept was chosen, how an argument was constructed, or what alternatives were considered, authorship becomes hollow. At this point, the issue is no longer about writing quality. It is about whether the researcher remains meaningfully present in the work. That presence is non-negotiable. Tools do not replace responsibility. Writing software, citation manager templates, and AI-assisted systems can all support efficiency and organization. They can reduce workload and help managing complexity. However, they cannot carry ethical responsibility. Responsibility remains with the researcher whose name appears on the work. This minimum acceptable practice here is straightforward. Researchers must be able to take responsibility for every core judgment in their work. This includes explaining why certain concepts were used, why particular interpretations were adopted, and why specific exclusion or emphasis were chosen. When tools make decisions feel automatic or invisible, ethical awareness can fade. This is precisely why this red line matters. Efficiencies must never be allowed to replace accountability. Tools must assist, but they cannot answer ethical questions. These questions must always return to the researcher. The third red line concerns omitting interpretative context. Any limitations, assumptions, or contextual differences that significantly allow or affect how research findings should be interpreted or applied must not be minimized or hidden simply to make the research appear cleaner or stronger. This red line is not about data accuracy, it is about interpretation. Research does not exist in isolation. Once it published or presented, others may cite it, expand it, or use it to inform decisions. When crucial context is removed, readers are deprived of the information they need to use the research responsibility. Omitting context may feel like a presentation choice, but it has ethical consequences, even when findings are technically correct. Removing key limitations shifts responsibilities onto readers without warning. This shift crosses a non-negotiable boundary. What these red lines have in common is not a demand for perfection. They are not designed to eliminate all uncertainty or risk in research. Instead, they exist to keep responsibility visible. Each red line protects a different aspect of visibility: ownership of ideas, accountability for arguments, transparency of interpretation. These boundaries are intentionally minimal. They do not tell researchers how to be excellent. They tell researchers what they must not do, even under pressure. When those boundaries are respected, gray areas may still exist, but responsibilities remain traceable. Ethical writing does not require flawless execution. It requires the researchers do not remove information or responsibility, simply because doing so makes the work appear stronger, cleaner, or more efficient. That restraint is the core ethical commitment these red lines enforce. At this point, we have identified 3 non-negotiable red lines. They are not meant to make research flawless, and they are not meant to resolve every difficult case in advance. Their purpose is simpler and fundamental. They ensure that when research is read, cited, or used, the researcher remains clearly visible and accountable. Academic writing, citation practice, and AI tools are all means. They are powerful and useful, but they are not moral engines. What cannot be outsourced, blurred, or delegated is responsibility. When responsibility remains clear, ethical judgment remains possible, and we move forward. These red lines will serve as anchors. They remind us that integrity in academic writing is not about avoiding mistake. It is about maintaining responsibility. That responsibility is the line must not be crossed. End of this section.